Welcome to the KD Report. I'm Kimberly Dvorak. Using GOP tactics, the Democrats have successfully shut President Trump's agenda down. The vehicle? Stall, 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 and then threaten a government shutdown. And voila, you have a recipe for success. For Democrats, that is. The latest smackdown is over President Trump's ban on sanctuary cities. U.S. District Court Judge William Orrick issued a preliminary injunction stemming from two lawsuits, the first from San Francisco and the other filed from Santa Clara County. The judge tried to make a name for himself in order to slow President Trump's executive order that financially punishes cities for not adhering to federal immigration laws. The kicker? The Golden State judge that issued the temporary hold was an Obama appointee responsible for adding approximately $200,000 to the Democrat coffers.
As you are all well aware, today the United States District Court for the Northern District of California issued a nationwide injunction enjoining enforcement of Section 9A of President Trump's recently issued Sanctuary City executive order. This is why we have courts, to halt the overreach of a president and attorney general who either don't understand the Constitution or choose to ignore it.
Of course, President Trump took to Twitter and said, "First, the Ninth Circuit rules against the ban, and now it hits on sanctuary cities. Both ridiculous rulings. See you in the Supreme Court." The only problem with his tweet is the judge is not from the Ninth Circuit. Nevertheless, he continued to tweet, "The Ninth Circuit, which has a terrible record of being overturned, close to 80%, they used to call this judge shopping, messy system." He ended with, "Democrats used to support border security. Now they want illegals to pour through our border." Despite the mainstream media open border mantra, the immigration debate really resonates with middle-class American voters who believe the king of construction would actually follow through with his promises to secure the southern border with a big barrier and end sanctuary cities by withholding federal tax dollars. However, the MSM media thinks otherwise.
The separation of powers,
yes.
And we have that for a reason. We want that constitutional balance, and we certainly want a checks and balances on the president, and that's why there's that separation.
Right, on the issue of sanctuary cities. I've always struggled with the concept of sanctuary cities myself because they violate federal law. The United States law, U.S. law requires these jurisdictions to notify ICE, to notify the federal government if you have undocumented immigrants living in your region. And these cities essentially say, we're not going to uphold federal law. We're going to reserve our right to do that.
And this is one case that was really famous in 2015. There was an undocumented immigrant who shot a girl. Now, this was a gentleman who had, who had been deported 5 times. He had 7 felonies. He was on probation from Texas and fled to San Francisco knowing he'd be protected. I think everyone can agree when it comes to people that are this is a 5-time felon.
Right, he shouldn't have been.
He should not be in this.
But then the federal government can get involved because ICE are federal government agents. What the federal government wants these states to do is to employ state resources. That is not the business of the state.
I'm not saying that's what.
There's a lot of things that go wrong, but I don't think you can name more than maybe, and I mean no disrespect, but you can name 5 times in the 25, 30 years of people going because people try to follow the law.
According to a GAO report, criminal aliens, both legal and illegal, make up 27% of all federal prisoners. Clearly, this is more than 5 times, as Whoopi Goldberg tries to imply.
And let's not spread this thing that rapists and murderers are coming from other countries.
But it's been reported by Fusion and Huffington Post that coyotes, or human traffickers, rape 80% of the women before they reach America. Despite warnings from the U.S. advertisements, illegal immigrants admit they often bribe Mexican officials to skirt roadblocks that act as a deterrent. However, President Trump is getting support from Texas.
Been dealing with this for so many years along the Texas border. We've had very little help from the federal government over the last 8 years particularly. And then we have within our own state somebody like Sally Hernandez of Travis County, Austin area, who's a sheriff who says when she is releasing prisoners that are illegal that she's not going to cooperate with the federal government. That you know, that creates some issues for our legislators, and I think it creates some interest in stopping that. Now, if a law enforcement officer or somebody that's an elected official doesn't get themselves involved in helping with these issues, they potentially could suffer being removed from office, and it potentially could be a misdemeanor. I would not be surprised if there was a little less defiance, because, I mean, now you're talking about potential criminal penalties. Plus, you got to think about the impact. I live in Travis County, so what's the benefit to me as a Travis County citizen of a sheriff who won't turn people over to INS who have committed crime?
But those on the left disagree.
Thursday morning, the Texas House of Representatives passed a sanctuary city bill that critics fear could open the door for racial profiling. The bill, if approved, would allow local law enforcement officers to ask people about their immigration status during an arrest or detention.
In order for me to identify someone who I don't believe is from here, it's either skin color, language, or accent.
Whether you agree with President Trump's immigration policy or not, the numbers don't lie.
You know, illegal immigration down 40%, some in March, maybe the lowest numbers we've ever had. The whole attitude's changed. I've talked to border agents along the border who are leaders, and they're excited that they have a president who's allowing them to do their job, and they feel like they've been held back for 8 years.
Thanks for joining me today. For more information, please visit thekdreport.com. And remember, news is more than a soundbite.